peace be upon you, and Allah's mercy and blessings. Welcome to Revelations of Islam. In this video, together we will explore valuable teachings of Islam that, inshallah, will strengthen your faith and bring light into your life. Solitude, this seemingly empty and silent space, is often feared by those who experience it. However, in divine wisdom, it is far from being a curse. In this world, where agitation and distraction seem to rule our lives, there is a deeper path, an inner journey that only the chosen take. A path where solitude becomes a spiritual ally, a divine test that allows the soul to purify itself and draw closer to Allah. But how can we understand this solitude as a divine call? Why are elected officials often tested by isolation? Stay with me, because in this video, we will discover the beauty hidden behind the ordeal of loneliness and how it can be a key to deep spiritual transformation. Before continuing, a quick reminder: subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next videos. If you like what you see, a like would be greatly appreciated, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your continued support. 1. Solitude, a divine test. Loneliness, in its pure nature, is often seen as an unbearable burden. The silence that surrounds us can seem heavy, like an empty room in which the echo of our thoughts resonates endlessly. Yet, if we look deeper, we can see that this void is actually a space for reflection, a fertile ground for spiritual growth. In the modern world, where distractions and constant connections are everywhere, loneliness becomes a real challenge. But in Islamic wisdom, this challenge is seen from another angle, that of a blessing in disguise, a divine test. Allah created us alone, and in this solitude, there is a profound opportunity that many are unaware of. The Quran reminds us of this in a striking way. And it is He who created you alone. Surat Al-Insan 76:2. This verse makes us understand that Allah intended us to experience moments of solitude, not as a punishing ordeal, but as an invitation to an inner journey, a quest for spiritual purity. By being alone, we have the chance to come face to face with ourselves, without the artifices of the outside world. It is in these moments of silence that our soul can rid itself of the distractions of this world and focus on what is truly important: our relationship with Allah. Solitude then becomes a true inner sanctuary, a sacred space where the soul can purify itself and get closer to the one who created it. Allah's chosen ones, those who are chosen to carry out a spiritual mission, are often confronted with this solitude. They are called to move away from superficial relationships, to detach themselves from the noise of the world, to be able to concentrate fully on their connection with the Creator. Solitude becomes, in this context, a form of preparation, a means of preparing for the spiritual greatness that God wishes to grant them. Let's take a moment to think. If we live constantly surrounded by others, enveloped in relationships, conversations and distractions, can we really hear the still voice of Allah guiding us to the truth? Can the divine voice be heard in the tumult of the world? Solitude then becomes a way to regain this lost connection, a divine call that can only be heard in the silence of the heart. Solitude, far from being a void to escape, becomes a necessary space for spiritual growth. It is in this void that the soul finds room to reorganize itself, refocus, and purify itself. We tend to seek the company of others to feel our anxieties, but sometimes that company is exactly what takes us away from the inner peace that only Allah can provide. Solitude helps us to detach ourselves from the approval of others, to stop constantly seeking social acceptance, and to turn only to Allah. The question then becomes, how can we accept this solitude without fearing it, but rather embracing it as a form of purification? Think about a time in your life when you felt lonely. Perhaps you experienced it as a burden, a sign of rejection or abandonment. But what if this solitude was actually a gift? What if it was a message from God, calling you to refocus on what is truly essential? Perhaps in this silence, Allah invites you to discover a part of yourself that you had never dared to explore. Perhaps He is calling you into greater closeness with Him. What if the loneliness you feel today is, in reality, an invitation to get closer to Allah, to refocus on what is essential? How would you react if you understood that it is in these moments of solitude that your true spiritual strength is hidden? Wouldn't this be an opportunity to rid yourself of distractions, free yourself from external judgments, and focus fully on this sacred bond between you and your Creator? Say in the comment sections, Allah is great. 2. The test of social distancing. The ordeal of social distance, this sometimes painful separation from others, is part of the experience of elected officials. It is no coincidence that these souls are often called to find themselves alone, away from companions, friends, loved ones. However, this distance is not a sign of their defeat, nor of their inability to love or bond. It is rather a sign that their hearts are destined for a much greater mission, a mission which requires cutting certain earthly ties to better anchor themselves in the spiritual, in the call of the Most High. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the very example of the Chosen One, experienced this ordeal of isolation intensely. When first revealed, he was rejected, mocked, and shunned by his own community. He experienced isolation, not by choice, but because this isolation was part of his divine journey. Allah, in His infinite wisdom, allowed this test to refine his soul, to strengthen his faith, and to call him to a mission that would go beyond human and earthly boundaries. Allah said in the Quran, "And trust in Allah, and He is sufficient as protector." Surat Al-Ahzab 33:3. This absolute trust in Allah, even in isolation, is what allowed the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, to persevere. He did not see this social distance as abandonment, but as divine preparation for what he was going to accomplish. Each rejection, each moment of solitude was an opportunity for him to get closer to Allah, to strengthen his spiritual bond, and to anchor himself in the mission entrusted to him. This experience leads us to a deep reflection on our own lives. We have all, at one time or another, felt the pain of isolation, of the distance imposed by others or by circumstances. This feeling of loneliness, of rejection, can be overwhelming. But if we observe these moments with a spiritual perspective, can we see that they are not a curse but divine preparation for something greater? The relationships around us, sometimes fleeting or superficial, can be tests. Allah may remove certain people from our lives, not to punish us, but to teach us true spiritual independence. This withdrawal may be difficult, but it is a sign of Allah's desire to guide us toward a deeper trust in Him. When earthly bonds are broken, we are left with the certainty of an unalterable divine bond. Why are we so afraid of elation when it is in these moments that we can grow spiritually? Why do we always seek to fill this void with distractions or superficial relationships, when, perhaps, this isolation is precisely what we need to elevate our souls? Separation from the world does not mean the end of our connection, but the birth of a purer, stronger, deeper connection. Why do we sometimes fear isolation when, in reality, it is a form of spiritual elevation? Perhaps separation from the world is not a punishment, but a form of divine protection. Could it not be the way by which Allah prepares us to bear a greater spiritual responsibility, a mission that goes beyond anything we have known so far. 3. The path to inner purification. The elect, those whom God chooses for deep and spiritual trials, are often plunged into solitude. But this loneliness is not simply physical isolation. It is the crucible where the soul is transformed, where each moment spent alone becomes an opportunity for interior purification. Like gold, which must pass through fire to eliminate impurities, the chosen soul must pass through solitude in order to perfect itself, to free itself from the bonds of the material world and to refocus on the spiritual essence. Loneliness, in this sense, is not a curse but a cure. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, teaches us in a profound hadith. Loneliness is a remedy for those who seek to purify their hearts. It is in solitude that the soul is confronted with its own imperfections, with the darkness it carries within itself. It is in the silence of isolation that we can hear the voice of our own heart, the voice of Allah which guides us towards the light. The company of others, although it can be beneficial, sometimes becomes a veil between the soul and its Creator. The Prophet, in his infinite wisdom, knew that solitude was a space of intimate encounter with Allah, a moment of purification. Those who are chosen through this solitude know that they are not seeking the company of men, but the deepening of their bond with the divine. Loneliness thus becomes a form of inner struggle. It is a silent war against the distractions that take us away from our ultimate goal, closeness to Allah. Every thought that pulls us away from Him is an enemy to be defeated. Every material desire that pulls us down is an obstacle to overcome. But this fight is not a defeat. On the contrary, it is in these moments of solitude and sacrifice that the soul finds its true freedom. The elect do not seek the company of others, because they understand that the spiritual quest does not depend on superficial human relationships. Their goal is higher, their call is purer. To draw closer to the one who created them, to the one who is the Almighty. And it is in solitude that this quest becomes a sacred path, a winding but luminous road towards spiritual perfection. It is often said that loneliness is accompanied by deprivation. These deprivations, whether physical or emotional, are seen as sacrifices. However, it is these sacrifices that allow the soul to detach itself from the ego, its material desires, and its worldly attachments. Through sacrifice, the soul finds its purity, its innocence, and the light of Allah shines brighter within it. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, himself lived in difficult conditions, often alone, to get closer to his Lord and accomplish his will. So, when we feel loneliness, should we run away from it or rather embrace it as a unique opportunity? Are these moments of withdrawal not, in reality, sacred moments? Opportunities for purification, for intimate connection with Allah? Are we not called, sometimes, to withdraw to better understand the truth that resides in us and in the universe?
Have you ever felt that inner peace when you chose to take a moment away from social life to focus on your spirituality? Perhaps this is Allah's call to purify your heart. Perhaps this loneliness, far from being a burden, is a blessing in disguise, a gift from heaven to draw you closer to Him. Before continuing, a quick reminder. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our next videos. If you like what you see, a like would be greatly appreciated, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your continued support. 4. Superficial relationships and spiritual relationships. In a world where superficial relationships dominate, where the quest for likes, trivial conversations, and fleeting friendships are often more important than authentic connections,
it becomes easy to get lost. These relationships, while they may be enjoyable in the short term, only feed the ego. They don't touch the heart, they don't heal the soul, and often they leave us empty. But for elected officials, this type of company has no place. They understand that what really matters is not worldly ties, but spiritual ties, those that connect their soul to Allah. Allah warns us in the Quran against the superficiality of worldly relationships. Friends on that day will be enemies of one another, except the pious. Surat Az-Zukhruf 43:67. Here, Allah shows us that relationships based on appearance, material desires, and ego will eventually dissolve. In the afterlife, these relationships will no longer hold any value. Only sincere relationships, rooted in faith and piety, will survive. This truth strikes the elect, who know that divine company is the only true company. If Allah is their friend, then no other relationship, no matter how bright or full of promise it may seem, will be able to fulfill them in the same way. The elect are not rejected by Allah, but they consciously choose not to be captured by relationships that offer nothing spiritual. They know that human connections, as valuable as they are in this life, are temporary. The company of Allah, for its part, is eternal. It knows no end, no abandonment. It is a bond that persists beyond time, an unwavering support that nourishes the soul and protects the heart. In this spiritual journey, it is inevitable that the chosen ones often find themselves alone in a world where superficial relationships are numerous. Solitude then becomes a choice, not a burden, but a form of freedom. The ties they choose to cut are those that prevent them from focusing on what matters most, their intimate relationship with Allah. They know that sometimes, to get closer to the divine, you have to get away from the noise of the world, its distractions and its false friends. Far from being an abandonment of others, this withdrawal becomes a quest for greater clarity, a search for purity in the soul and in relationships. It is not solitude in itself that defines the chosen one, but the quality of the company he seeks to maintain. A spiritual company, a sacred relationship with the Creator. The company of Allah is the most precious of goods. He is the one who never disappoints us, the one who lifts us up, even in our darkest moments. What would happen if we stopped seeking relationships that feed our ego and started seeking the companionship of Allah alone? Perhaps this solitude, far from being a curse, is actually a path to an infinitely nobler and more eternal companionship. Perhaps in seeking Allah we find the peace and satisfaction that no human relationship could ever provide. 5. The ultimate reward and isolation as purification. The isolation experienced by elected officials is not an endless burden, nor a permanent suffering. Quite the contrary, it is a necessary step in their journey towards spiritual elevation, a sacred process that purifies them and prepares them for divine reward. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, showed us, through his own example, that trials, including loneliness and isolation, are means that God uses to purify and elevate his servants. He said, "Surely those who are tested in this world by loneliness and isolation will receive the greatest reward in the hereafter." This hadith resonates deeply in the hearts of believers, because it reminds us that although solitude may seem difficult, it is actually a path to infinite reward. Those here on earth who find themselves in solitude, but who remain faithful, pious and focused on their relationship with Allah, will experience a reward beyond what they can imagine. Solitude is therefore far from being a curse. It is a divine gift, an obligatory passage for those who seek the truth and the proximity of Allah. It is through these moments of withdrawal, far from the distractions of the world, that the heart can purify itself. Solitude becomes a form of purification of the soul, a process that allows one to detach oneself from material desires and draw closer to the divine essence. It allows us to refocus on what is essential, our connection with the Creator. Through this isolation, the chosen ones discover a deep peace, an inner silence, where they can hear the sweet voice of Allah which guides their hearts towards the truth. Each moment of solitude then becomes one more step towards this eternal reward promised in the afterlife. It is in these moments of withdrawal that they learn to truly know themselves, to understand their weaknesses and their strengths, and to purify their hearts of worldly attachments. The true reward is not in the recognition of men, nor in worldly honors, but in the love of Allah and the promise of His infinite reward. Those who know how to endure solitude with patience and gratitude see beyond the immediate ordeal, recognizing that it prepares them for something much greater and more precious, an eternal closeness to their Creator. If this solitude is Allah's way of purifying your heart and preparing you for eternal reward, can you see it in a new light? Perhaps this period of withdrawal, this time of isolation, is not a punishment, but an invitation to a profound change in your spiritual life. Can you embrace this solitude as a chance to draw closer to Allah and prepare yourself for the greatest reward? Isolation, far from being a simple ordeal, is in reality a divine invitation to reconnect with the essential, with the purity of our relationship with Allah. It is in these moments of solitude that the soul finds its true strength and prepares itself for the eternal reward promised by Allah. So the next time you find yourself in solitude, do not see it as a void to be filled, but as a precious gift, a unique opportunity for spiritual purification. Because, as the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, those who go through this ordeal with faith and patience will receive the greatest reward in the afterlife. May your solitude be a path to closeness to Allah and inner peace. Let yourself be guided by this silent light, for it leads to eternal truth. Before ending, if this video was helpful to you and you want to continue learning and growing in faith, don't forget to subscribe to Revelations of Islam and activate the bell to receive all our new videos.